We will now begin today's presentation on the protection of people and the environment. We will first begin by introducing ourselves. I have already introduced myself as the moderator of the session, but for those of you who may have missed it, my name is Dr. Nana Kwamna, and I'm the Director of the Environmental Assessment Division of the CNSC. I am joined by my colleagues, Dr. Hemendra Mulier, Environmental Risk Assessment Specialist with the Environmental Risk Assessment Division, and Dr. Ari Perazi, Environmental Program Officer with the Health Science and Environmental Compliance Division. This slide shows the key message of today's presentation, which will outline the CNSC's regulatory oversight activities in the areas of the protection of the health and safety of people, as well as the environment. The following are the points we hope that you take away from this webinar session. The CNSC, through robust environmental protection framework, sets out comprehensive lists of requirements that licensees must meet in order to protect people and the environment around nuclear facilities and activities. The CNSC plays an active role in ensuring the protection of people and the environment through compliance verification activities, as well as complementary activities such as independent monitoring and scientific research. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide a general overview of the CNSC's regulatory oversight activities in the areas of protection of people and the environment. We will begin by providing updates on the Near Surface Disposal Facility Project, or NSDF project, and in situ decommissioning projects, herein referred to as the ISD projects. And we will then provide an overview of the CNSC's environmental protection regulatory framework. We will also discuss CNSC compliance verification activities as they relate to environmental protection. In addition to compliance verification, CNSC staff also undertake complementary activities to ensure protection of people and the environment. We will highlight some of these complementary activities by providing an overview of both the CNSC's Independent Environmental Monitoring Program, or IEMP, and the CNSC's role in research and health studies. Throughout the presentation, we will discuss how all of these environmental protection oversight activities apply to the proposed NSDF and ISD projects. This slide situates us in terms of where we are within the fall webinar series that is being hosted by CNSC staff with respect to the NSDF and ISD projects. As you can see, we have already hosted one webinar on the transportation of radioactive waste, as well as one on the long-term safety of disposal facilities and in situ decommissioning regulatory framework. Following today's webinar, we will have 2 remaining webinar sessions in the fall webinar series. The webinars are designed to present general information on the topics listed, followed by a question and answer period with CNSC staff to respond to any questions participants may have on the specific topic covered in that particular session. Registration is now open for the remaining webinars listed, and we encourage you to sign up. We will circle back to this slide at the end of the presentation with more information on upcoming webinars and how to register. Please note that CNSC staff are currently working towards posting the recordings of both the Spring 2021 and Fall 2021 webinar presentations on the CNSC YouTube page. We will begin with project updates on the NSDF and 2 ISD projects. First, an update on the NSDF project. The CNSC will hold a 2-part public hearing on February 22nd, 2022, and continuing on May 31st, 2022, to consider the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories application for the NSDF project. CNSC staff are currently preparing the Licensed Commission Member Document, or the CMD, and the Environmental Assessment Report, or the EA report. CNL submission and CNSC staff CMD and EA report, which includes staff's conclusions and recommendations, will be available on the CNSC website or on request to the Secretariat after January 24th, 2022. Requests to intervene at the second part of the Commission hearing must be filed with the Commission Secretariat by April 11th, 2022, using the online request form, which is linked on this slide. For the ISD projects, CNL is planning to submit a revised draft environmental impact statement and responses to federal and provincial review comments for each of the nuclear power demonstration closure or NPD project and the in situ decommissioning of the White Shell Reactor or WR1 project in December of 2021. If the submissions pass completeness verification, the revised EIS and responses will undergo a technical review by the Federal Provincial Indigenous Review Team. Project updates can also be found in the project bulletins that are distributed by, to the NSDF, NPD, and WR1 mailing lists, as well as feature articles that are posted on the CNSC's website. I will now pass the presentation to Hemendra, who will provide an overview of the CNSC's regulatory framework as it pertains to environmental protection.
Thank you, Nana. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Hemendra Mulye. I'm an environmental risk assessment specialist at CNSC. The CNSC is mandated under the NSCA to ensure the protection of the environment and health of persons. To aid in achieving this mandate, the CNSC's environmental protection regulatory framework has four main components, the first being regulatory instruments. These include standards and regulatory documents, memoranda of understanding, and discussion documents. The second component is licensing and environmental programs, policies, and procedures, which include licensee and applicant documents and activities such as environmental impact statements, environmental risk assessments, environmental management systems, environmental monitoring programs, and waste management programs. The third component of CNSC's environmental protection regulatory framework is compliance verification, which encompasses inspections and assessments of licensee performance. The final component is support for decisions, which includes CNSC staff activities, including technical assessments of licensee information, licensee performance assessments, and research programs. Environmental protection for nuclear facilities and activities is carried out in accordance with Nuclear Safety and Control Act, or NSCA, and the regulations made under it. The CNSC requires the environmental effects of all nuclear facilities or activities to be considered and evaluated when licensing decisions are made. The NSCA includes provisions to ensure that licensees are meeting the CNSC's mandate to protect the environment and the health, safety, and security of persons. The CNSC's Reg Doc 2.9.1, Environmental Protection, Environmental Principles, Assessments, and Protection Measures, as seen on this slide, describe the CNSC's principles for environmental protection and outlines the CNSC's requirements and guidance to applicants and licensees for developing environmental protection measures. It is a comprehensive, full life cycle environmental protection framework document. It is used to assess license applications for proposed new nuclear facilities and activities, license applications for existing facilities and activities, such as license renewals and amendments, and environmental protection measures. The CNSC's environmental protection framework, as described in Reg Doc 2.9.1, respects federal and provincial legislations, applies the environmental protection CSA standards in a graded approach, and aligns with requirements outlined in the CNSC's regulatory documents. Environmental reviews are central to the CNSC's responsibilities. The type of environmental review depends on the size and complexity of the nuclear facility or activity and includes the following: ongoing environmental assessments or EAs under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012, which includes the EAs for the NSDF and the ISD projects, impact assessments under the Impact Assessment Act, federal lands reviews under the Impact Assessment Act, environmental protection reviews under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, which depend on the size and complexity of the project, and environmental assessments under land claims agreements or provincial and territorial regimes. Assessments under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012 have been carried in previous, have been covered in previous webinars. For this webinar session, we will be focusing on environmental protection reviews under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. The CNSC conducts environmental protection reviews, or EPRs, for all license applications with potential environmental interactions in accordance with its mandate under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act to ensure the protection of people and the environment. An EPR is a science-based environmental technical assessment conducted by the CNSC staff and is based on the licensee's environmental protection program and documentation submitted by the licensee. These include annual compliance reports, environmental risk assessments, and compliance verification activities. EPRs summarize CNSC staff's assessment of licensee, environmental protection, and human health information. EPRs can be reported either in the environmental protection section of a commission member document, also known as CMD, or in a separate report called an Environmental Protection Review Report, or EPR report. The most recent EPR report written for a CNL facility was for the license renewal of the Whiteshell Laboratories in 2019. We will now move on to an overview of CNSC's required environmental protection measures. The environmental protection measures required for a nuclear facility or activity depends on the complexity of the facility or activity and on the severity of its interactions with the environment. Licensees are required to meet all environmental requirements in all acts and regulations that pertain to the facility and or activity, including provincial requirements, as well as requirements set by Environment and Climate Change Canada and other federal jurisdictions. Environmental protection measures that licensees are required to undertake include the following: the drafting of periodic environmental risk assessments, typically on a 5-year cycle, which include human health risk assessments and ecological risk assessments. Effluent control and monitoring, environmental monitoring, the implementation of environmental management systems, and the implementation of groundwater protection programs. In addition, licensees are required to meet the Canadian Standards Association standards that are outlined in their License Conditions Handbook. The CNSC will ensure licensees are abiding by those requirements and standards through compliance verification activities, including in-person inspections. CNSC staff actively participate in the writing and revision of the CSA standards. The NSCA empowers the CNSC to enter into agreements with other regulatory agencies and departments, often known as a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. These arrangements provide a framework for bilateral cooperation and provide the participants with assurances regarding the security of information exchanges, as well as cooperation in areas of mutual interest. The MOUs are not legally binding, but nevertheless represent serious commitments. The CNSC currently has MOUs in place with many federal agencies and provinces, including the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Health Canada, and Environment and Climate Change Canada. Some examples of activities undertaken by the CNSC with other federal agencies under this MOU include: the CNSC has coordinated with DFO on Fisheries Act authorizations for remediation work at the Port Hope Harbor including coordination of fish mortality notifications from remediation activities and turbidity and contaminant monitoring of the outer harbor. The CNSC has also coordinated with Environment and Climate Change Canada for reviews of Port Hope and Port Granby annual compliance and monitoring reports, establishing liquid effluent limits for the wastewater treatment plant, joint inspections of the facility, information sessions on climate change impacts on Great Lakes water levels, and turbidity and contaminant monitoring. We will now give an overview of the CNSC's environmental protection compliance activities. CNSC's environmental compliance oversight ensures that licensees operate safely and comply with requirements for the protection of people and the environment. In accordance and in compliance with the License Conditions Handbook, and where applicable, Reg Doc 3.1.2, Reporting Requirements, Volume 1, Non-Power Reactor Class 1 Nuclear Facilities and Uranium Mines and Mills, licensees provide annual environmental compliance reports on their effluent and environmental releases of nuclear and hazardous substances, and report on environmental events and occurrences at licensed facilities. CNSC staff conduct environmental compliance reviews and verifications for all licensed facilities and activities. This slide illustrates some of the CNSC staff's environmental compliance reviews and verifications, including the following: conducting technical reviews and verifications of the changes to a licensee's environmental protection program, ensuring the implementation of new regulatory requirements for licensed facilities, reviewing annual performance reports submitted to ensure that licensees' EP programs are implemented and protective of the environment and the public, reviewing event reports submitted to ensure that licensee has taken adequate corrective measures to protect the environment and the public, and conducting planned reactive or desktop inspections. We will expand on these compliance activities and reviews in the coming slides. The extent and scope and depth of the CNSC's compliance program is customized for each licensed facility and uses a risk-informed approach to compliance. The program is focused on achieving the key CNSC strategic outcome of ensuring that licensed facilities are operating safely. This graphic provides an overview of the main components of the CNSC's compliance program. The CNSC's compliance program has four main activities. First, monitoring, which includes review by CNSC staff of licensee submitted performance reports and monitoring program data. Second, compliance verification is the act of field verification with inspectors and specialists traveling to perform inspections or monitoring on or around licensed sites. Number three, reporting relates to requirements for licensees to self-report to the CNSC when they are in non-compliance with regulatory obligations. And number four, enforcement pertains to activities the CNSC undertakes to move a non-compliant licensee back into compliance. Compliance oversight programs allows the CNSC to keep an eye on the licensee's performance from a distance to establish trends, and when necessary, ask for additional data or measurements. Environmental risk assessments, or ERAs, are core environmental protection documents for existing Class 1 facilities and uranium mines and mills, for which the CNSC has determined that there are direct interactions with the environment. ERAs are produced by licensees and provide science-based information to support commission decisions and to prioritize the implementation of mitigation measures and associated environmental monitoring programs. The complexity of ERAs is defined by the facility's interactions with the surrounding environment and typically includes human health risk assessments and ecological risk assessments. As outlined in Reg Doc 2.9.1, ERAs are a regulatory requirement for Class 1 facilities and uranium mines and mills, and are considered compliance verification criteria in the facility's License Conditions Handbook. CNSC staff's assessment of the environmental risk of a facility or activity is a process that identifies, quantifies, and characterizes the risk posed by contaminants, which could be nuclear or hazardous substances, and physical stressors in the environment. In conjunction with the regulatory requirements, the ERA serves as the basis for control and monitoring of releases, environmental monitoring, and any supplementary studies. All of these measures are interrelated and are governed by the environmental management system. ERAs for existing facilities are updated by the licensee on a 5-year basis or sooner if there is a significant operational change at the facility, and reviewed by CNSC staff for acceptance. Annual environmental monitoring reports, also known as annual compliance reports or ACRs, are required from licensees for nuclear facilities and activities. ACRs contain information about the licensee's environmental monitoring program, including radioactive release data, radiological and non-radiological monitoring and reporting, and relevant reports. ACRs also contain information on the 14 safety and control areas, including operating performance, safety analysis, environmental protection, and radiation protection. The licensee is required to post ACRs on their website. CNSC staff use the information in licensees' ACR reports as part of the CNSC's regulatory oversight for nuclear facilities and activities. This regulatory oversight allows CNSC staff to verify the licensee's compliance with all regulatory requirements, each site's license and license conditions handbook, and any other applicable standards and regulatory documents. It is important to note that CNSC's Reg Doc 3.1.2, Public Information and Disclosure, contains the regulatory requirements for reporting of ACRs. The CNSC requires its licensees to disclose to the CNSC any events or incidents involving its licensed activities that relate to health, safety, and security of Canadians and the environment, as described in Reg Doc 3.2.1, Public Information and Disclosure. Licensees are also required to develop and implement public information programs to ensure that information related to health, safety, and security of persons are effectively communicated to the public. By reviewing a licensed event reports, the CNSC can identify areas which may need further investigation by CNSC staff and action by the licensee. An example of a recent event report for one of the CNL facilities is illustrated on the slide. On January 28, 2021, CNL informed the CNSC of an increase in cesium levels in its water samples at the Whiteshell Laboratories site outfall. This event was investigated by CNL and the investigation results were submitted to the CNSC. CNSC staff conducted an investigation which concluded that cesium levels remained below regulatory limits. CNSC staff concluded there were no impacts to workers, the public, and the environment from this increase in cesium levels. Oops, 1 second. Okay. The CNSC works closely with other federal agencies and provincial counterparts for compliance inspections following environmental events or incidents at CNSC licensed facilities. This slide provides information about an event that occurred at the Port Hope Long-Term Waste Management Facility in June of 2017, during which the Port Hope area experienced heavy rainfall with an accumulation of 50 to 75 millimeters of rain over a period of 12 hours. Following the heavy rainfall, CNL reported that an uncontrolled release of untreated water had occurred at the Port Hope project site. At the time of the overflow, CNL reported that no impact to the environment or health effects were anticipated as a result of the release. Following the event, CNSC staff conducted an inspection to gather information regarding the event, including radiological measurements and environmental sampling. The inspection team was made up of CNSC staff and representatives from the Ontario Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, as well as Environment and Climate Change Canada. As a result of the inspection, CNL was ordered to ensure its emergency preparedness measures and equipment were immediately available to mitigate accidental releases of untreated water. CNL was also ordered to immediately review the water management plans and programs to ensure adequate storage capacity is available to prevent the releases of radiological and hazardous substances for the licensed site. I will now pass the presentation to my colleague, Dr. Perazzi.
Thank you, Dr. Murlier, and good afternoon to all, and thank you for your participation. My name is Ari Perazzi. I'm an Environmental Program Officer at Health Sciences and Environmental Compliance Division. And I would like to apologize because of the technique, as you can see in my video diffusion, due to technical reasons, I will turn off my camera to ensure a stable connection during my presentation. Thank you. For environmental protection inspection, using a well-established inspection process and standardized inspection guides and templates, the CNSC consistently and transparently conducts compliance verification inspections for existing licensed facilities. The scope, frequency, and complexity, complexity, I apologize. Complexity of CNSC's inspections are commensurate with the nature and inherent risk of the facility and its operations and activities. As part of overall CNSC inspection, the environmental protection inspections are conducted to ensure that the licenses operations, which are their activities, facilities, equipment, and work performances meet all the regulatory requirements and that people and the environment are protected. The result of this inspection activity will form part of CNSC staff's evaluation of the licensee's performance of the facility. To give a few examples, CNSC staff have conducted multiple inspections during the past few years, such as the effluent verification monitoring program inspection at Chalk River Laboratories in 2016. This inspection verified airborne and liquid effluent monitoring programs, including the record sampling locations, parameter sample analysis, etc. As a result of this inspection, the CNSC inspection team found that the Chalk River effluent monitoring program and its implementation was compliant and met all the regulatory requirements. Another example was the environmental monitoring program inspection at the same place, Chalk River Laboratories, in 2018. This inspection verified the environmental monitoring program and including all the releases to the environment and the results of sample analysis and etc. As a result of this inspection, the CNSC inspection team found that the Chalk River environmental monitoring program as well and its implementation was compliant and met all the regulatory requirements. And most recently, in 2021, the environmental management system inspection was conducted at Chalk River Laboratories. The result of the CNSC staff analysis are currently in progress. Next slide, please. On data availability and transparency, we will be discussing the environmental and human health data. Part of the CNSC's mandate is to disseminate scientific, technical, and regulatory information to the public. To help achieve this mandate, the CNSC ensures that the relevant environmental protection information is easily available to the public. To facilitate this, CNSC regulatory document, Reg Doc 3.2.1, entitled Public Information and Disclosure, sets out the regulatory requirement of the CNSC for public information and disclosure for licenses and applicants. As per Reg Doc 3.2.1, all the licenses are required to post the environmental risk assessment, annual compliance reports, and summaries of the probabilistic safety assessment on their website for public access. Additional information on environment and human health can also be found on CNSC's facility-specific web pages, such as such informations are federal, provincial, and municipal monitoring programs, facility-specific updates, result of CNSC's independent environmental monitoring program, sampling campaigns. Radionuclide release data sets can also be accessed on the Government of Canada's Open Government portal. To be noted that CNSC is in consultation with Environment and Climate Change Control to link the Open Government portal and the National Pollutant Release Inventory and NPRI, so that the radionuclide release data sets and other data can be accessed from both the NPRI and Open Government portal. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, we will provide an overview of CNSC's Independent Environmental Monitoring Program, IEMP. Next slide, please. The CNSC's IEMP is an additional and independent initiative that allows the CNSC to confirm that the public and the environment are protected from the operations of CNSC regulated facilities. The IEMP is a complement to the CNSC's ongoing environmental protection compliance verification activities, such as environmental protection inspections. The IEMP's objectives are achieved through measuring concentration of constituents of interest in the environment surrounding nuclear facilities, comparing concentration of radiological and hazardous substances with appropriate background values, environmental quality criteria, and other available benchmarks, and assessing risk to the public and the environment associated with the releases and concentration of radiological and hazardous substances in the environment. However, it is important to note that IEMP does not relieve licenses of their responsibilities. Licenses continue to be responsible for their own environmental protection programs, which are continually verified by the CNSC. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the IEMP process, which includes planning, sampling, analysis, and interpretation and publication of result phases. Program planning and sampling phases involve the selection of contaminants of potential concern, identification of the main sources of the releases, selection of sampling locations in publicly accessible area for environmental media, primarily such as air, water, soil, sediment, and local foods. Additionally, the planning phase considers any direction from the Commission, upcoming licensing hearings, past environmental compliance concerns, and routine monitoring in the area. Once collected, the samples are sent to the CNSC laboratory in Ottawa for analysis of both radiological and non-radiological substances. Then CNSC staff will then review the results obtained from the lab against the relevant guidelines, screening levels derived by CNSC, and licenses data and background data as available and where available. The results are then shared with the public, which will be discussed further in further detail later. Next slide, please. The IEMP is one of many CNSC tools and initiatives that enables engagement with indigenous nations and communities and the public in the vicinity of nuclear facilities. CNSC staff collaborate with indigenous nations and communities and the public during the planning and sampling phases of IEMP to ensure samples are being collected in locations important to the surrounding communities. This collaboration involves meeting with the communities, workshops, walking the land, and hands-on sampling with the traditional knowledge holders. Thank you. Next slide, please. The IEMP sampling campaign results are posted on CNSC's website on the IEMP dashboard, which includes a landing page, a short discussion on the results obtained for each facility, interactive maps, and site-specific data. The dashboard, the IEMP dashboard, is interactive and provides the ability to select a facility on the map and view specific information on sample and results around the facility. Results are also sent to the indigenous nations and communities and are tailored to ensure that they meet the needs of indigenous people, such as providing indigenous nation and community with results cards or pamphlets for specific IEMP sites or sampling campaigns. When new results are posted, the CNSC sends an email to subscribers and local media to ensure that they are informed. Next slide, please. In this slide, we'll present an overview of sampling campaigns conducted at CNL facilities today. A few examples. For Chalk River Laboratories, the IEMP has taken place at the Chalk River Laboratory site since 2012, with the most recent completed campaign in 2019. The next scheduled campaign is slated for 2023. Emails will be going out to the indigenous nations and communities in December to invite interested parties to participate and provide feedback on the IEMP sampling plan for the Chalk River Laboratory site. For Whiteshell Laboratories, an IEMP sampling campaign took place in 2017. A subsequent sampling campaign was scheduled for this year, but due to COVID travel restrictions, has now been deferred to 2022. This deferral provided the CNSC the opportunity to engage with Manitoba Métis Nation, Black River First Nation, and Hollow Water First Nations on the sampling plan ahead of the campaign. Nuclear power demonstration. The most recent campaign at the NPD site occurred in 2018, and the next sampling campaign is scheduled for 2023. The IEMP will engage with interested and local indigenous nations and communities on the sampling plan for the NPD site in the fall of 2022. I apologize. CNSC staff have concluded from previous sampling campaigns and the results obtained that at all CNL facilities, the public and the environment in the vicinity of these facilities are protected. Information on previous sampling campaign completed at each CNL site can be found on the CNSC IEMP dashboard. Next slide, please. In the next few slides, I'll provide an overview of CNSC's role in research and health studies. Thank you. Next slide, please. An important part of the CNSC's mandate is to provide objective scientific, technical, and regulatory information to the public on health and safety topics. The CNSC also stays abreast of new science and information to consider in CNSC regulatory oversight and decision-making. CNSC staff's participation and involvement in research and health studies help the CNSC meet these requirements. CNSC staff conduct health studies on various topics, including tritium, uranium mining and milling, nuclear energy worker, and the general public. Next slide, please. Health studies are conducted, as stated, in order to enable the effective management of the radiation risk and to set regulatory limits that will protect workers, public, and the environment. As also mentioned in the previous slide, CNSC staff continually keeps abreast of any new publication and data related to the health of populations living near nuclear facilities. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of health studies relating to the CNL facilities. Though no specific studies have been conducted directly on the population around the Chalk River Laboratories, NPD, and Whiteshell Laboratory sites, however, several epidemiological studies exist on Canadian and other populations living near or working in the nuclear plants. These studies have shown cancer rates to be lower or within the natural variation of the disease in Ontario or Canada. In 2014, a 2014 paper analyzed cancer risk among over 40,000 Canadian nuclear workers and provided no evidence of increased risk of cancer mortality between 1964 and 1994. In fact, all the workers of this group had a lower cancer mortality compared to the general Canadian population. Radiation doses from the Chalk River Laboratory, Whiteshell Laboratories, and NPD sites to the member of the public are extremely low, at least 100 to 1,000 times lower than natural background radiation and public dose limit, ensuring that the surrounding communities and environment remain protected. Next slide, please. In addition to epidemiologic studies, CNSC staff also reviewed the results of the available local public health unit reports and data to provide further independent verification that the health of public working in and living near the CNL facilities is not impacted by the facilities' operations. The Renfrew County and District Health Unit monitors the health of population around the Chalk River Laboratory site, and disease rates are compared to the other similar populations to detect any potential health outcomes that may be of concern. Public Health Canada publishes interactive map-based dashboards which display how key public health indicators like cancer incidence and mortality vary across the province over the years. According to the PHO, Public Health Ontario, the incidence rate for all cancers in 2014 for Renfrew County and District Health Unit was similar to that of Ontario. The Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority monitors the health of populations near Whiteshell Laboratories facilities. The population and community health studies and reports indicate that the common mortality rates among the Manitoba populations are similar to other provinces in Canada. Based on exposure and health data, CNSC staff have not observed and do not expect to observe any adverse health outcomes due to the presence of this CNL facilities. Next slide, please. To summarize, assuring compliance with legislations, regulations, and licensing requirements is one of the CNSC's core responsibilities. And this is carried out through compliance verification as well as through enforcement and regulatory oversight of licensed facilities and activities. Together, these activities enable the CNSC to provide assurance to the Canadian of the continued compliance and safety performance of licenses for the protection of the people and the environment. I will now pass the presentation back to the moderator, Dr. Kwame.
Thank you, Ari. Further information on each of our upcoming webinars with respect to the NSDF and ISD projects is found on this slide. Registration is available through the CNSC main webpage, but for ease of reference, we've also included the registration link on the bottom of this slide. We really hope to see you at some of our future webinars.